Question 1. Upon reviewing an inquiry from an investment analyst seeking preliminary financial results for Baidu's upcoming quarterly report, an employee is aware that the figures are still being finalized and have not yet been publicly disclosed. The employee is considering how to respond to the analyst's request, recognizing the importance of maintaining confidentiality and adhering to regulatory requirements. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the Baidu employee? Option A. Inform the analyst that the preliminary financial results are not yet public and direct them to Baidu's official investor relations website for any publicly available information. Option B. Share the preliminary financial results with the investment analyst, explaining that it is for their early insight and to help them prepare for the official announcement. Option C. Forward the analyst's request to a colleague in a different department who might have a general understanding of market trends, without sharing the specific financial figures. Option D. Provide the analyst with a general overview of the company's performance without disclosing any specific financial numbers, stating that detailed results will be released on the official earnings call. The correct answer is A. Inform the analyst that the preliminary financial results are not yet public and direct them to Baidu's official investor relations website for any publicly available information. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual at Baidu to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with internal policies and relevant regulations concerning the disclosure of material non-public information. The pressure to share information quickly, coupled with the potential for personal gain or reputational damage, necessitates a rigorous adherence to ethical and legal standards. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between permissible information sharing and prohibited insider trading or disclosure of confidential data. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to Baidu's internal policies on information disclosure and confidentiality, as well as relevant Chinese securities regulations. This means verifying the public availability of any information before sharing it externally and ensuring that no material non-public information is disclosed to individuals who could trade on it. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of fair markets, protects Baidu's proprietary information, and prevents violations of laws designed to prevent insider trading and market manipulation. It aligns with the ethical obligation to act with integrity and in the best interests of the company and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to share the preliminary financial results with the investment analyst, even with the intention of seeking their opinion. This constitutes a disclosure of material non-public information, which could lead to illegal insider trading if the analyst were to act upon it. This action violates Baidu's internal policies on confidentiality and potentially Chinese securities laws. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the analyst's inquiry outright, without considering the nature of the information requested and whether it is already public. Caution is necessary. A complete refusal without proper assessment might be seen as uncooperative and could miss an opportunity to clarify public information or guide the analyst to publicly available resources. However, the primary failure here is not in the refusal itself, but in the potential for misjudging what constitutes public versus non-public information in a subsequent interaction. A third incorrect approach would be to share the information with a trusted colleague within Baidu who is not directly involved in the financial reporting process, believing this to be a safe internal communication. While internal communication is generally permissible, sharing material non-public information with individuals who do not have a legitimate business need to know can still create risks of leaks and potential misuse. And it is crucial to ensure that all internal sharing adheres to strict confidentiality protocols and is limited to those with a direct role in the matter. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Immediately identifying the nature of the information in question. Is it public or non-public, and is it material? 2. Consulting Baidu's internal policies on information disclosure and confidentiality. 3. If there is any doubt, seeking guidance from Baidu's legal or compliance department. 4. Prioritizing compliance with all applicable laws and regulations over speed or perceived courtesy. 5. Documenting all communications and decisions related to information sharing. Question 2. The audit findings indicate a potential unauthorized access attempt to sensitive user data within Baidu's internal systems. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the responsible team? Option A. dismiss the findings as a potential false positive and continue with normal operations. Option B, immediately report the potential breach to external regulatory bodies without an internal assessment. Option C, initiate a formal internal investigation by engaging the cybersecurity and legal departments, following Baidu's established incident response protocols. Option D, directly access and review the system logs to identify the source of the access attempt without prior authorization. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal internal investigation by engaging the cybersecurity and legal departments, following Baidu's established incident response protocols. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the strict requirements of data privacy and security, as mandated by Chinese cybersecurity laws and Baidu's internal data handling policies. The audit findings highlight a potential breach of these regulations, necessitating a careful and compliant response. The correct approach involves a systematic and authorized investigation that prioritizes data integrity and user privacy. This means initiating a formal internal investigation process, engaging the relevant security and legal teams, and adhering strictly to Baidu's established protocol for handling suspected data breaches. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of data protection and cybersecurity enshrined in Chinese law, such as the Cybersecurity Law of the People's Republic of China, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. These laws mandate robust data security measures, incident response plans, and the protection of personal information. By following internal procedures and involving authorized personnel, Baidu ensures that the investigation is conducted legally, ethically, and without further compromising sensitive data. An incorrect approach would be to immediately access and review the logs directly without proper authorization or adherence to established protocols. This action would violate Baidu's internal data access policies, which are designed to prevent unauthorized access and maintain data security. Furthermore, it could contraindicate Chinese data protection laws by potentially exposing personal information to unauthorized individuals or by mishandling the data during an informal review. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit findings and assume they are minor or a false positive without any further investigation. This failure to act would be a direct contravention of regulatory expectations for proactive data security and incident management. Chinese regulations, including the CSL, require organizations to implement measures to prevent and mitigate cybersecurity risks, which includes investigating and addressing audit findings promptly. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately report the findings externally to regulatory bodies, without first conducting an internal assessment and following Baidu's internal incident response procedures. While transparency with regulators is important, premature external reporting without a proper internal understanding of the situation can lead to unnecessary alarm, miscommunication, and potential non-compliance with reporting timelines and requirements stipulated by Chinese law. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and document the audit findings. Second, consult Baidu's internal policies and procedures for data security incidents and investigations. Third, engage the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as the cybersecurity team, legal department, and compliance officers. Fourth, conduct a thorough, authorized investigation following established protocols. Finally, based on the investigation's outcome, determine the appropriate course of action, which may include remediation, reporting to relevant authorities, and updating internal controls. This systematic process ensures compliance, protects data, and upholds professional integrity. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unusual login times and data access requests originating from a Baidu employee's account. Which of the following approaches best represents a responsible and compliant risk assessment strategy? Option A. Ignore the pattern as it is likely a temporary anomaly and does not warrant further attention. Option B. Disseminate the raw monitoring data to all relevant department heads to solicit their immediate opinions on potential risks. Option C. Immediately flag the employee for disciplinary action and restrict their system access pending a full investigation. Option D. Conduct a thorough, multifaceted investigation to verify the nature and context of the login times and data access requests before any conclusions are drawn or actions are taken. The correct answer is C. Immediately flag the employee for disciplinary action and restrict their system access pending a full investigation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the potential for over-monitoring and the misinterpretation of data. The Baidu hiring assessment test context implies a focus on internal compliance and operational integrity within a technology company operating under Chinese regulations. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine risk indicators and normal operational fluctuations. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes confirmed policy violations or significant deviations from expected behavior. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and fair process, ensuring that actions taken are based on substantiated evidence rather than mere suspicion. Regulatory frameworks in China, while evolving, generally emphasize lawful data collection and processing, and any disciplinary or corrective actions must be grounded in clear evidence of misconduct or policy breach. This approach respects employee privacy while upholding organizational standards. An incorrect approach that immediately escalates based on a single anomaly without further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to unwarranted accusations, damage to employee morale, and potential legal repercussions for unfair treatment or privacy violations. It fails to adhere to the principle of innocent until proven guilty in a professional context and bypasses necessary verification steps. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the volume of data without context or analysis, is also flawed. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and an inability to discern meaningful patterns from noise. It risks misallocating resources and potentially flagging innocent activities as problematic, leading to an inefficient and ineffective risk management strategy. This approach neglects the qualitative aspect of risk assessment, which is crucial for understanding the nature and severity of potential issues. A third incorrect approach, which involves sharing raw, unverified data with multiple departments without a clear need-to-know or established protocol, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This constitutes a breach of data confidentiality and could lead to the spread of misinformation or gossip, creating a toxic work environment. It also violates principles of data security and privacy, which are increasingly important under Chinese data protection laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with defining clear risk parameters and acceptable deviations. When the monitoring system flags an anomaly, the next step should be a controlled, internal investigation to gather more context and verify the nature of the event. This involves cross-referencing with other data sources, consulting relevant policies, and if necessary, discreetly seeking clarification from the individual or team involved. Escalation should only occur when evidence of a genuine risk or policy violation is established, and any subsequent actions must be documented and aligned with company policy and applicable regulations. Question 4. Examination of the data shows that Baidu is planning to launch a new suite of AI-powered personalized services that will collect and analyze extensive user behavioral data. To meet aggressive market entry timelines, the product development team is proposing to defer a comprehensive data privacy and security risk assessment until after the initial launch, which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional ethical standards for Baidu. Option A. Delegate the entire responsibility for data privacy and security risk assessment to the marketing team, who are focused on user acquisition and engagement metrics. Option B. Perform a minimal high-level risk assessment focusing only on immediate, obvious threats before launch, with a plan to conduct a more detailed assessment later. Option C. Conduct a thorough, multi-stage data privacy and security risk assessment prior to launch, integrating findings into the product design and development process. Option D. Proceed with the launch as planned and address any identified data privacy or security issues reactively as they arise post-launch. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough, multi-stage data privacy and security risk assessment prior to launch, integrating findings into the product design and development process. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the imperative to adhere to regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data privacy and security. Baidu, as a technology company operating in a data-intensive environment, must navigate these complexities with utmost diligence. The core of the challenge lies in balancing innovation and market expansion with the legal and ethical obligations to protect user data. Careful judgment is required to ensure that business objectives do not override fundamental principles of data governance and user trust. Correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment framework that integrates regulatory requirements from the outset of any new product development or market expansion initiative. This means identifying potential data privacy and security risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the principles of data protection regulations, such as those governing the collection, processing, and storage of personal information. By embedding risk assessment into the development lifecycle, Baidu can demonstrate a commitment to responsible data handling, build user trust, and avoid potential legal penalties and reputational damage. This proactive stance is ethically imperative, as it prioritizes the well-being and privacy of users. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over thorough risk assessment. This could lead to the deployment of products or services with unaddressed vulnerabilities, potentially exposing user data to breaches or misuse. Such an approach would be a direct violation of data protection principles and could result in significant legal repercussions, including fines and sanctions, as well as severe damage to Baidu's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial risk assessment that only addresses obvious threats, neglecting more subtle or emerging risks. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adequately protect user data, again leading to potential regulatory noncompliance and ethical breaches. Finally, an approach that relies solely on post-launch incident response, rather than preemptive risk mitigation, is fundamentally flawed. This reactive stance is insufficient for safeguarding sensitive data and indicates a disregard for the preventative measures mandated by regulatory frameworks. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes a privacy by design and security by design philosophy. This involves integrating risk assessment and mitigation into every stage of product development and business operations. When faced with a decision, professionals should ask, does this action comply with all relevant data protection regulations? And does this action uphold our ethical responsibility to protect user data? If there is any doubt, further investigation, consultation with legal and compliance teams, and the implementation of robust risk mitigation measures are essential before proceeding. Question 5. Assessment of how a Baidu product development team should proceed when designing a new user engagement feature that requires the collection and analysis of user interaction data, considering potential privacy implications and compliance with Chinese data protection regulations. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment early in the development cycle. Consult with Baidu's legal and compliance departments, and implement robust data anonymization and consent mechanisms before launch. Option B. Focus on maximizing the amount of user data collected to enable advanced analytics, with a plan to anonymize data only if explicitly mandated by a regulatory body after the feature is live. Option C. Develop the feature using existing data handling practices, assuming they are sufficient, and only seek legal review if specific user complaints about data privacy emerge. Option D. Proceed with feature development, prioritizing rapid iteration and deployment, and address any identified data privacy concerns post-launch as they arise. The correct answer is D. Proceed with feature development, prioritizing rapid iteration and deployment, and address any identified data privacy concerns post-launch as they arise. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Baidu employee tasked with developing a new feature. The core difficulty lies in balancing the drive for innovation and rapid deployment with the imperative to adhere to Baidu's internal ethical guidelines and relevant Chinese cybersecurity and data privacy regulations. The pressure to launch a competitive product can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks associated with user data handling. Navigating this tension requires a deep understanding of both technical possibilities and the legal and ethical boundaries governing data usage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential data privacy and security risks during the feature development lifecycle and implementing robust mitigation strategies. This aligns with Baidu's commitment to responsible innovation and compliance with China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. Specifically, it requires conducting a thorough data impact assessment, anonymizing or pseudonymizing sensitive data where possible, obtaining explicit user consent for data collection and usage, and ensuring data is stored and transmitted securely. This proactive, risk-averse strategy minimizes legal exposure and upholds user trust, which are paramount for a company like Baidu operating in a highly regulated digital environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing speed of development over thorough risk assessment and mitigation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks violating PIPL and CSL by potentially collecting or processing personal information without adequate safeguards or user consent, leading to severe penalties and reputational damage. Implementing the feature without consulting Baidu's legal and compliance teams, even if internal guidelines are considered, is also problematic. These teams possess specialized knowledge of evolving regulatory landscapes and can identify nuances missed by development teams. Failure to engage them could result in unintentional noncompliance with specific interpretations or new directives from regulatory bodies. Relying solely on anonymization without considering the possibility of re-identification, especially with sophisticated techniques, is another potential pitfall. While anonymization is a crucial step, it's not always foolproof. A comprehensive approach would also involve pseudonymization and strict access controls, ensuring that even anonymized data is handled with care to prevent any unintended breaches of privacy. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Baidu should adopt a privacy by design and security by design mindset. This involves integrating ethical and legal considerations into every stage of the product development process, from conception to deployment and ongoing maintenance. A structured approach would include 1. Early identification of data types and potential risks. 2. Consultation with legal and compliance experts. 3. Implementation of technical and organizational safeguards. 4. Continuous monitoring and auditing of data handling practices. 5. Transparent communication with users regarding data usage. This systematic process ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly, minimizing the likelihood of regulatory violations and fostering user trust. Question 6. Which approach would be most effective for Baidu to optimize its AI-driven content recommendation system while ensuring strict adherence to China's cybersecurity and data protection regulations? Option A. Prioritize rapid deployment of new algorithms based on extensive user data collection to enhance recommendation accuracy with post-deployment compliance checks. Option B. Focus solely on improving computational efficiency of existing algorithms, assuming that no new data privacy concerns arise from such technical adjustments. Option C. Implement a/B testing of new recommendation features without consulting legal or compliance teams, relying on user feedback as the primary indicator of success and compliance. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of current data handling practices and algorithm logic, assessing potential impacts on user privacy and data security against China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law, and implement changes only after legal and compliance approval. Correct answer is A. Prioritize rapid deployment of new algorithms based on extensive user data collection to enhance recommendation accuracy, with post-deployment compliance checks. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Baidu, as a technology company operating in a highly regulated digital space, must balance innovation with strict adherence to data privacy and user protection laws. The rapid evolution of AI technologies, particularly in areas like personalized content recommendation and user interaction, creates a constant need for process optimization to improve efficiency and user experience. However, any optimization must be undertaken with a profound understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context would be Chinese cybersecurity and data protection laws. The core challenge lies in identifying improvements that enhance performance without compromising user privacy, data security, or algorithmic fairness, all while remaining compliant with evolving legal requirements. The correct approach involves a systematic and compliant review of existing processes. This entails identifying specific bottlenecks or inefficiencies within Baidu's AI development and deployment pipelines. Crucially, it requires a thorough assessment of how proposed changes might impact data handling, user consent mechanisms, and the potential for algorithmic bias, all within the bounds of China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law. Any optimization must prioritize transparency, data minimization, and robust security measures. This approach ensures that Baidu not only achieves its operational goals, but also upholds its legal and ethical obligations to its users and the regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on perceived technical advantages or competitive pressures, without a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment. For instance, aggressively collecting more user data to improve AI models, without explicit consent or clear legal justification under Chinese law, would violate data minimization principles and potentially the personal information protection law. Similarly, deploying AI algorithms that exhibit discriminatory outcomes, even if unintentional, could lead to violations of fairness principles and potentially other regulations concerning user rights. Another flawed approach would be to bypass established internal review processes for AI development, such as neglecting to consult with legal and compliance teams, thereby increasing the risk of non-compliance with Baidu's internal policies and external regulations. Professionals at Baidu should employ a decision-making framework that integrates regulatory compliance from the outset of any process optimization initiative. This involves forming cross-functional teams including engineers, data scientists, legal counsel, and compliance officers. Before any changes are implemented, a detailed risk assessment should be conducted, specifically evaluating potential impacts on data privacy, security, and algorithmic fairness against the backdrop of Chinese law. Continuous monitoring and auditing of optimized processes are also essential to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to any changes in the regulatory landscape. Question 7. Implementation of new data privacy regulations by Baidu requires the product development team to significantly alter their approach to user data collection for a new AI-powered feature. Which of the following stakeholder perspectives best aligns with a compliant and ethically responsible implementation strategy? Option A. Relying on the company's existing data privacy policy, assuming it covers the new regulatory requirements without specific review to expedite the feature launch. Option B. Prioritizing the collection of the maximum amount of user data deemed potentially useful for future feature development, with a plan to seek retrospective consent if required by regulators. Option C. Engaging legal and compliance teams early in the design phase to ensure all data collection and processing activities strictly adhere to the new regulations, including obtaining explicit user consent before any data is collected. Option D. Focusing solely on the technical feasibility of data collection, deferring any compliance considerations until after the feature has been released to the market. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing the collection of the maximum amount of user data deemed potentially useful for future feature development, with a plan to seek retrospective consent if required by regulators. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Baidu's compliance team as they navigate the implementation of new data privacy regulations within a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The core difficulty lies in balancing the company's innovative product development goals with the stringent requirements of the specified regulatory framework, which mandates specific data handling and user consent protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that Baidu's operations remain compliant without stifling technological advancement or alienating its user base. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with legal and compliance experts to interpret the nuances of the regulations and integrate them into the product development lifecycle from the outset. This ensures that Baidu's data processing activities are designed to be compliant by default, minimizing the risk of future violations. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes user privacy and data protection as mandated by the specified framework, demonstrating a commitment to responsible innovation. An incorrect approach would be to assume that existing data handling practices are sufficient without a thorough review against the new regulations. This failure to adapt to new legal requirements poses a significant regulatory risk, potentially leading to fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of product launch over comprehensive compliance checks. This demonstrates a disregard for user rights and regulatory obligations, which can result in severe penalties and loss of user trust. Finally, a reactive approach, addressing compliance issues only after they arise, is also professionally unacceptable. This indicates a lack of foresight and a failure to uphold the company's duty of care towards its users and adherence to the law. Professionals should adopt a proactive, risk-based approach. This involves continuous monitoring of the regulatory environment, conducting regular internal audits, and fostering a culture of compliance throughout the organization. When faced with new regulations, the decision-making process should involve a cross-functional team including legal, engineering, product, and compliance departments to ensure a holistic understanding and implementation of requirements. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that a new data utilization strategy could significantly improve user engagement metrics for Baidu's core services. However, the proposed strategy involves aggregating and analyzing user data in a manner that may not be explicitly covered by existing internal data privacy guidelines or clearly defined under current Chinese data protection regulations. What is the most responsible course of action for the Baidu product team? Option A. Seek immediate external legal counsel to advise on the strategy, bypassing internal review processes to expedite the decision-making. Option B. Halt the implementation of the new strategy and initiate a comprehensive review of Baidu's internal data privacy policies, and consult with legal and compliance departments to ensure full adherence to Chinese cybersecurity law, data security law, and personal information protection law before any deployment. Option C. Implement the strategy with a disclaimer to users that their data may be used in new ways, without seeking explicit consent or conducting a formal risk assessment. Option D. Proceed with implementing the new data utilization strategy immediately to capitalize on the potential efficiency gains, assuming that if it's not explicitly prohibited, it is permissible. Correct answer is D. Proceed with implementing the new data utilization strategy immediately to capitalize on the potential efficiency gains, assuming that if it's not explicitly prohibited, it is permissible. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's desire for efficiency and growth with the imperative to adhere to Baidu's internal policies and relevant Chinese regulations concerning data handling and user privacy. The core conflict lies in potentially compromising user trust and regulatory compliance for perceived short-term gains. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests without jeopardizing Baidu's reputation or legal standing. The correct approach involves prioritizing a thorough review of Baidu's internal data privacy policies and relevant Chinese cybersecurity and data protection laws before implementing any new data utilization strategy. This approach is right because it demonstrates a commitment to responsible data governance, which is a cornerstone of user trust and regulatory compliance. Specifically, Chinese laws such as the Cybersecurity Law (CSL), the Data Security Law (DSL), and the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) impose strict requirements on how data, especially personal information, can be collected, processed, stored, and transferred. Adhering to these laws ensures that Baidu operates within legal boundaries, avoids hefty fines, and maintains user confidence. This proactive stance on compliance is essential for long-term business sustainability. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing the new data utilization strategy without proper vetting fails to acknowledge the stringent regulatory landscape in China. This would likely violate provisions of the PIPL, which mandates consent for processing personal information and requires data impact assessments for certain activities. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the strategy based solely on the efficiency study's findings without consulting legal or compliance teams, ignores the critical role of regulatory oversight. This could lead to unintentional breaches of the DSL, which governs data security and cross-border data transfer, potentially resulting in severe penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach, which is to seek external consultants for advice without first understanding Baidu's internal policies, is inefficient and potentially risky. While external advice can be valuable, it must be grounded in Baidu's specific operational context and existing compliance framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the problem and its potential implications. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, including legal, compliance, product, and engineering teams. Next, they should gather all pertinent information, including internal policies, regulatory requirements, and the findings of the efficiency study. The framework then moves to evaluating potential solutions against these criteria, prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations. Finally, the decision should be implemented with ongoing monitoring and review to ensure continued adherence to regulations and policies. Question 9. During the evaluation of a new AI-powered content moderation tool developed by Baidu for its social media platforms, what is the most appropriate approach to risk assessment to ensure compliance and mitigate potential negative impacts? Option A. Rely primarily on the development team's assurances and past project successes to gauge the risk level, without extensive independent verification. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential operational, legal, ethical, and reputational risks, and develop specific mitigation strategies for each identified risk. Option C. Focus exclusively on the potential revenue generation of the new tool, deferring any detailed risk analysis until after its initial launch. Option D. Prioritize the speed of deployment by conducting a high-level review of only the most obvious financial risks, assuming other risks are minimal. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential operational, legal, ethical, and reputational risks, and develop specific mitigation strategies for each identified risk. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk assessment with the imperative to adhere to Baidu's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. The core difficulty lies in identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with a new product launch, without compromising compliance or introducing undue delays. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment is thorough, objective, and actionable. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive review of all potential risks, including operational, financial, legal, and reputational aspects, and then developing specific mitigation strategies. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for responsible product development and market entry. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and proactive risk management, which is crucial for maintaining stakeholder trust and ensuring the long-term success and compliance of Baidu's ventures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial gains without a thorough risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for potential negative consequences, such as regulatory penalties, reputational damage, or operational disruptions, which could ultimately outweigh any short-term financial benefits. Such an approach violates the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders by ignoring foreseeable risks. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by conducting a superficial risk assessment would also be professionally unsound. This haste could lead to the overlooking of critical risks, leaving Baidu vulnerable to unforeseen problems. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold professional standards, potentially resulting in significant financial or legal repercussions for the company. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experiences without rigorous data analysis would be problematic. While past experience is valuable, it should not substitute for a data-driven assessment of current risks. This approach risks perpetuating outdated assumptions or failing to account for new or evolving risk factors, leading to an inaccurate and incomplete risk profile. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, evaluating existing controls, developing mitigation plans, and establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms. Professionals should always prioritize compliance with internal policies and external regulations, ensuring that risk assessments are objective, evidence-based, and contribute to informed decision-making that safeguards the company's interests. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Baidu's new AI-powered recommendation engine for its search platform is experiencing high user engagement, but also generating concerns about potential algorithmic bias and the privacy implications of its data collection methods. The product team is pushing for an accelerated rollout of enhanced personalization features based on this engine, citing competitive pressures. Which approach best balances innovation with responsible risk management for Baidu? Option A. Perform a quick, high-level review of the AI engine's core functionality to identify only the most obvious risks, and then proceed with the rollout, relying on user feedback to flag any significant problems. Option B. Proceed with the accelerated rollout of enhanced personalization features immediately, assuming that any emergent issues can be addressed through post-launch monitoring and iterative updates. Option C. Assign the entire risk assessment process to a single data scientist with limited experience in AI ethics and privacy regulations, with the expectation that they will identify and document all potential risks independently. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, multi-stage risk assessment that includes bias detection, privacy impact analysis, and scenario planning for unintended consequences, with findings directly informing feature prioritization and mitigation strategies before further rollout. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive, multi-stage risk assessment that includes bias detection, privacy impact analysis, and scenario planning for unintended consequences, with findings directly informing feature prioritization and mitigation strategies before further rollout. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for rapid product development and market responsiveness with the imperative to conduct thorough risk assessments, a core tenet of responsible innovation and regulatory compliance. The pressure to launch a new feature quickly can lead to shortcuts in risk identification and mitigation, potentially exposing Baidu and its users to unforeseen harms. Careful judgment is required to ensure that risk assessment is not merely a procedural hurdle, but an integral part of the development lifecycle. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential risks associated with the new AI feature, assessing their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies before deployment. This aligns with the principles of responsible AI development and data protection, which are increasingly codified in regulatory frameworks governing technology companies. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to user safety, data privacy, and ethical AI deployment, which are paramount for maintaining trust and avoiding regulatory scrutiny. This approach demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and a proactive stance on risk management, which is essential for any technology firm operating in a regulated environment. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by proceeding with deployment without a comprehensive risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to adequately identify and address potential risks, such as data bias, privacy breaches, or unintended consequences of the AI's functionality, could lead to significant reputational damage, user harm, and potential regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves conducting a superficial risk assessment that only addresses obvious or easily quantifiable risks, also fails to meet professional standards. This superficiality can lead to the overlooking of subtle but critical risks, such as emergent behaviors of the AI or downstream impacts on vulnerable user groups. A third incorrect approach, which involves delegating the entire risk assessment process to a single junior team member without adequate oversight or expertise, demonstrates a lack of commitment to robust risk management and could result in a flawed assessment due to inexperience or insufficient resources. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates risk assessment into every stage of the product development lifecycle. This involves establishing clear risk assessment protocols, allocating sufficient resources for thorough analysis, fostering a culture where risk identification is encouraged and rewarded, and ensuring that findings are acted upon. When faced with competing pressures, such as market deadlines, professionals must advocate for the necessary time and resources to conduct adequate risk assessments, escalating concerns if these are not met. The ultimate goal is to ensure that innovation is pursued responsibly, with a clear understanding and management of potential risks. Question 11. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in user engagement metrics on Baidu's platform, but the underlying data used for this analysis contains sensitive personal information. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data privacy regulations while still enabling effective performance evaluation? Option A. Share raw user data with external analytics partners for comprehensive review. Option B. Utilize raw, unanonymized user data for detailed performance insights. Option C. Anonymize or pseudonymize user data before conducting performance analysis. Option D. Retain all user data indefinitely for future performance trend analysis. The correct answer is C. Anonymize or pseudonymize user data before conducting performance analysis. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and compliance within the context of Baidu's operations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for performance analysis with the stringent requirements of data protection regulations. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of user trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that data is handled ethically and legally, even when pursuing business objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves anonymizing or pseudonymizing user data before it is used for performance analysis. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to many data protection frameworks. By removing or obscuring personally identifiable information, the risk of unauthorized access or misuse of sensitive data is significantly reduced, while still allowing for valuable insights into platform performance. This method ensures that Baidu adheres to its regulatory obligations regarding user privacy. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using raw, unanonymized user data for performance analysis is a direct violation of data privacy regulations. It exposes personally identifiable information to unnecessary risk and fails to implement adequate safeguards. Sharing raw user data with third-party analytics providers without explicit consent or robust data processing agreements is also a serious breach. This can lead to data leakage and non-compliance with data transfer regulations. Implementing data retention policies that are overly broad or do not adequately secure sensitive information during the retention period poses a risk. If data is kept longer than necessary or is not properly protected, it increases the potential for breaches and non-compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Baidu must adopt a proactive and compliance-first mindset. When dealing with user data, the default should always be to prioritize privacy and security. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws applicable to Baidu's operations and implementing technical and organizational measures to ensure compliance. A robust data governance framework, regular training for employees, and a commitment to ethical data handling practices are essential for navigating these complex regulatory landscapes. Question 12. The performance metrics show that Baidu's user feedback processing system is experiencing significant delays, impacting customer satisfaction scores. To address this, a proposal suggests implementing a new AI-driven sentiment analysis tool that can process feedback much faster. However, this tool would require direct access to a larger volume of raw user feedback data than currently permitted by internal data governance policies, which are designed to align with the regulatory framework governing data handling in Baidu's primary operating region, which approach best balances the need for process optimization with regulatory compliance and ethical considerations. Option A. Develop a phased implementation plan for the AI tool, starting with a limited dataset that complies with current data governance policies, and gradually expanding access as a robust data anonymization and consent mechanism is developed and approved. Option B. Reject the AI tool proposal entirely due to the data access requirements and focus on optimizing existing manual review processes. Option C. Lobby for a change in the regulatory framework to allow for broader data access for performance enhancement purposes before considering any new tools. Option D. Implement the new AI tool immediately to improve response times and address any potential data policy deviations through a post-implementation review. Correct answer is D. Implement the new AI tool immediately to improve response times and address any potential data policy deviations through a post-implementation review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Baidu, as a technology company operating within a specific regulatory environment, must balance the drive for efficiency with adherence to data privacy and user protection laws. The pressure to optimize processes can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently violate these regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that performance improvements do not compromise legal compliance or ethical standards. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks, and proposing changes that are not only efficient, but also fully compliant with the relevant regulatory framework, governing data handling and user experience within Baidu's operational jurisdiction. This approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the legal landscape and integrates compliance from the outset of process optimization, ensuring that any proposed changes are vetted against these requirements. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation, which is often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing technology companies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and cost reduction without considering regulatory implications risks significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. For instance, implementing a new data processing algorithm that bypasses existing anonymization protocols, even if it speeds up analysis, would likely violate data protection laws. Another incorrect approach might involve automating customer support responses in a way that fails to provide clear avenues for users to exercise their data rights, such as the right to access or delete personal information, which is a common requirement in many jurisdictions. Such failures stem from a lack of due diligence regarding regulatory obligations and an overemphasis on immediate performance gains over long-term compliance and ethical conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory environment. This includes identifying all relevant laws, guidelines, and industry best practices. Before proposing or implementing any process optimization, a thorough risk assessment should be conducted, specifically evaluating potential compliance issues. Engaging legal and compliance teams early in the process is crucial. Furthermore, a continuous monitoring and auditing mechanism should be in place to ensure that optimized processes remain compliant over time, especially as regulations evolve. Question 13. System analysis indicates that Baidu is developing a new feature that will leverage user interaction data to personalize content recommendations. Before full deployment, what is the most appropriate risk assessment approach to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations and ethical user data handling? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment that scrutinizes the proposed data collection, processing, and sharing mechanisms, explicitly evaluating the alignment with user consent and relevant data protection laws. Option B. Delay a formal risk assessment until after the feature has been launched and user feedback indicates potential privacy concerns. Option C. Proceed with feature deployment, assuming that existing general user agreements cover the scope of data usage for personalization. Option D. Focus the risk assessment primarily on the technical performance and scalability of the data processing infrastructure, with a secondary consideration for privacy. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment that scrutinizes the proposed data collection, processing, and sharing mechanisms, explicitly evaluating the alignment with user consent and relevant data protection laws. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Baidu, as a technology company operating in a highly regulated digital space, must navigate the complexities of data privacy and user consent. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to innovate and personalize user experiences with the stringent requirements of data protection laws. A hasty or incomplete risk assessment can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of user trust. Careful judgment is required to identify potential risks, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and implement appropriate mitigation strategies that align with regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes user privacy and consent from the outset. This means systematically identifying all potential data processing activities, understanding the types of data involved, and evaluating how this data will be used. Crucially, it requires assessing whether the proposed data usage aligns with the explicit consent obtained from users, and whether it complies with relevant data protection regulations. This approach is correct because it embeds privacy by design and by default, ensuring that Baidu's product development and deployment are compliant and ethically sound. It demonstrates a commitment to user rights and regulatory adherence, which is paramount in the current data-driven landscape. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical feasibility of data collection without adequately considering user consent or regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for fundamental data protection principles, potentially leading to unauthorized data processing and breaches of privacy. Another incorrect approach that assumes existing general consent is sufficient for all new data uses, without re-evaluating or seeking specific consent, represents a significant ethical and regulatory lapse. This overlooks the principle of purpose limitation and the need for informed consent for specific processing activities. A third incorrect approach that delays or omits a thorough risk assessment until after a product launch, hoping to address issues reactively, is also professionally unsound. This reactive stance increases the likelihood of significant noncompliance, potential data breaches, and the need for costly remediation, undermining the company's integrity and legal standing. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape applicable to Baidu's operations. This involves identifying all relevant data protection laws and guidelines. Next, they should conduct a thorough data mapping exercise to understand what data is collected, how it is processed, and for what purposes. A critical step is to assess the legal basis for each processing activity, with a strong emphasis on obtaining valid and informed user consent where required. This should be followed by a risk assessment that evaluates the potential impact of data processing on user privacy and the likelihood of regulatory noncompliance. Mitigation strategies, including privacy-enhancing technologies and robust consent management mechanisms, should then be implemented. Finally, continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment of data processing activities are essential to maintain compliance in an evolving regulatory and technological environment. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing an advanced AI system for granular user behavior analysis at Baidu could significantly enhance personalized service delivery and advertising effectiveness. However, this system would process a wide range of user data, including browsing history, search queries, and interaction patterns. Which approach best ensures Baidu's compliance with China's regulatory framework for data protection and cybersecurity? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive legal and technical review of the AI system's data processing activities against the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) and relevant cybersecurity regulations before deployment, ensuring explicit consent mechanisms, data minimization, and robust security protocols are in place. Option B. Implement the AI system with a broad, non-specific consent statement in the terms of service, allowing for extensive data collection and analysis without granular user opt-in for specific data types. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment to gain a competitive advantage, relying on the argument that the AI's benefits outweigh potential minor privacy concerns, and address any regulatory inquiries reactively. Option D. Proceed with the AI implementation, assuming that existing general data privacy policies are sufficient, and conduct a post-implementation review for any major issues. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the AI implementation, assuming that existing general data privacy policies are sufficient, and conduct a post-implementation review for any major issues. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new technology with the inherent risks and regulatory obligations. Baidu, as a technology company operating within China, must navigate the specific regulatory landscape governing data privacy, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. The challenge lies in ensuring that the adoption of advanced AI for user behavior analysis, while potentially offering significant business advantages, does not inadvertently violate the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) of the People's Republic of China or other relevant cybersecurity regulations. A careful judgment is required to implement the technology in a manner that is both innovative and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the AI system's data handling practices against the PIPL and relevant cybersecurity laws. This includes understanding what constitutes personal information, obtaining necessary consent for data processing, ensuring data minimization, implementing robust security measures, and establishing clear data retention and deletion policies. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance and ethical data stewardship, which are fundamental requirements for any company operating in China. Adhering to these regulations protects user privacy, builds trust, and mitigates legal and reputational risks for Baidu. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the AI implementation without a comprehensive review of its compliance with Chinese data protection laws. This could manifest as assuming existing data handling practices are sufficient or prioritizing speed to market over thorough legal and ethical due diligence. Such an approach would be a direct violation of the PIPL, which mandates explicit consent for processing personal information, outlines specific requirements for cross-border data transfers, and imposes strict obligations on data handlers. Furthermore, It could contravene cybersecurity laws that require robust security measures to prevent data breaches and unauthorized access. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the AI in a way that collects excessive or unnecessary user data, even if some consent is obtained, as this would violate the principle of data minimization enshrined in PIPL. This failure to adhere to data minimization principles not only risks legal penalties, but also erodes user trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulations, e.g., PIPL, cybersecurity law of the PRC. This should be followed by a risk assessment that evaluates the potential compliance gaps and data privacy implications of the proposed AI technology. Subsequently, a compliance plan should be developed, outlining the steps necessary to bridge any identified gaps, including obtaining appropriate consents, implementing technical and organizational security measures, and establishing clear data governance policies. Finally, ongoing monitoring and auditing should be integrated to ensure continued compliance as the technology evolves and regulations are updated. Question 15. Strategic planning requires Baidu to consider the potential impact of its new AI-powered personalized content recommendation system on user privacy and algorithmic fairness. Given the evolving regulatory environment in China concerning data security and AI governance, which approach best ensures Baidu's compliance and ethical operation? Option A. Implement the AI system with minimal user data collection, interpreting existing regulations in the most business-friendly manner to avoid unnecessary compliance burdens. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, and algorithmic impact assessment, AIA, in consultation with legal and compliance experts, and proactively engage with relevant regulatory bodies to ensure the system adheres to the cybersecurity law, data security law, and personal information protection law before full deployment. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment of the AI system to gain a competitive advantage, and address any potential regulatory concerns only if they arise after launch. Option D. Rely solely on internal technical teams to ensure the AI system meets performance benchmarks, assuming existing internal data handling policies are sufficient without external review. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, and algorithmic impact assessment, AIA, in consultation with legal and compliance experts, and proactively engage with relevant regulatory bodies to ensure the system adheres to the cybersecurity law, data security law, and personal information protection law before full deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Baidu, as a publicly traded company operating within a global market, must navigate complex and evolving regulatory landscapes. The core of the challenge lies in balancing innovation and market competitiveness with strict adherence to legal and ethical obligations, particularly concerning data privacy and algorithmic transparency. A failure to do so can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with regulatory bodies and industry best practices to understand and implement compliance measures for new AI features. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and ethical AI development. Specifically, for a company like Baidu, this means aligning with relevant Chinese cybersecurity and data protection laws, such as the Cybersecurity Law, CSL, the Data Security Law, DSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. These laws mandate stringent requirements for data collection, processing, storage, and cross-border transfer, as well as principles of fairness, legality, and necessity in algorithmic decision-making. By conducting thorough impact assessments and seeking guidance, Baidu can mitigate risks and build trust with users and regulators. An incorrect approach that prioritizes rapid market deployment, without adequate regulatory consideration, would fail to uphold the principles of legality and user protection enshrined in Chinese law. This could lead to violations of data privacy rights, unauthorized data processing, and the deployment of algorithms that are discriminatory or opaque, thereby incurring penalties under the PIPL and DSL. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on internal technical feasibility without external regulatory input, ignores the fundamental requirement for compliance. This oversight can result in features that, while technically sound, are legally non-compliant, exposing Baidu to significant legal repercussions and operational disruptions. A third incorrect approach, which involves attempting to circumvent or interpret regulations in the most lenient way possible for competitive advantage, is ethically unsound and legally risky. Such an approach undermines the spirit of the law, which is designed to protect individuals and ensure fair market practices, and can lead to severe penalties and long-term damage to Baidu's reputation. Professionals should adopt a proactive and collaborative decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying potential regulatory implications early in the development lifecycle. 2. Engaging legal and compliance teams to interpret relevant laws and guidelines. 3. Conducting thorough impact assessments, including data privacy and algorithmic fairness evaluations. 4. Seeking clarification from regulatory authorities when ambiguity exists. 5. Prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations alongside business objectives. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that Baidu is developing a new AI-powered personalized content recommendation service that will collect and process user interaction data. To accelerate market entry, the product team proposes to deploy the service with minimal upfront review of its data handling mechanisms, assuming current data protection protocols are adequate. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance requirements for Baidu in China? Option A. Rely on the existing general data privacy policies of Baidu to govern the new service, without specific review against the PIPL and CSL for this particular AI application. Option B. Delegate the entire responsibility for regulatory compliance of the new service to the marketing department, assuming their understanding of user engagement is sufficient. Option C. Proceed with the deployment to gain market traction and address any potential regulatory concerns that arise post-launch through reactive adjustments. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment in accordance with the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) and Cybersecurity Law (CSL) before deployment, ensuring all data collection, processing, and storage practices are compliant. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment in accordance with the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) and Cybersecurity Law (CSL) before deployment, ensuring all data collection, processing, and storage practices are compliant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect investors and market integrity. Baidu, as a publicly traded entity, must navigate these complexities with utmost diligence. The core challenge lies in ensuring that all business activities, particularly those involving new product launches or market expansions, strictly adhere to the relevant Chinese cybersecurity and data privacy laws. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive regulatory compliance strategy. This means establishing robust internal processes for reviewing new initiatives against the Personal Information Protection Law (PIPL) and the Cybersecurity Law (CSL) of the People's Republic of China. It requires cross-functional collaboration between legal, engineering, product, and compliance teams to identify potential risks early, conduct thorough impact assessments, and implement necessary safeguards before any product or service is deployed. This approach ensures that Baidu not only meets its legal obligations, but also builds trust with its users and maintains its license to operate. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over regulatory due diligence. This could manifest as launching a new feature without a thorough assessment of its data handling practices, assuming existing compliance measures are sufficient. Such an action would violate the PIPL and CSL, which mandate specific requirements for data collection, processing, storage, and cross-border transfer. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the legal team to interpret and enforce regulations, without adequate input or buy-in from the technical and product development teams. This siloed approach can lead to misunderstandings and the unintentional creation of non-compliant systems. A third incorrect approach might involve attempting to find loopholes or ambiguities in the regulations to justify a less compliant path, which is ethically unsound and carries significant legal risk. Professionals in such situations should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations, e.g., PIPL, CSL. 2. assessing the potential impact of a proposed action on data privacy and cybersecurity. 3. Consulting with legal and compliance experts to understand the regulatory requirements and potential risks. 4. Developing and implementing mitigation strategies to ensure compliance. And 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes. Question 17. Investigation of Baidu's recruitment process reveals that the HR department collects extensive personal information from all applicants, including social media profiles, academic transcripts, and even personal references, without explicitly informing candidates about the specific purposes for which each piece of data will be used or how long it will be retained. Which of the following approaches best adheres to regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for data handling in a hiring context? Option A. Develop a clear data privacy notice that outlines the specific types of data collected, the precise purposes for which each data point is used in the hiring decision, and the defined retention periods for all applicant data, requiring explicit consent before collection. Option B. Collect only basic contact information and resume, and discard all other information immediately after the hiring decision is made, regardless of its potential relevance for future roles. Option C. Collect all candidate information as standard practice, but provide a general privacy policy link on the careers page that broadly covers data usage. Option D. Implement a policy of collecting all available candidate information to ensure a comprehensive understanding of each applicant, and retain this data indefinitely for future reference. The correct answer is D. Implement a policy of collecting all available candidate information to ensure a comprehensive understanding of each applicant, and retain this data indefinitely for future reference. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and compliance within the context of Baidu's operations, specifically concerning the handling of user data collected during the hiring process. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for thorough candidate assessment with the stringent requirements of data protection regulations applicable to Baidu's operational jurisdiction. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that data collection and retention practices are both effective for recruitment and fully compliant, avoiding potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. The correct approach involves implementing a data minimization strategy coupled with explicit, informed consent from candidates regarding the collection, purpose, and retention period of their personal data. This aligns with best practices in data protection, emphasizing that only necessary data should be collected and that individuals should be fully aware of how their information will be used. Regulatory frameworks typically mandate transparency and consent, ensuring that individuals retain control over their personal information. This approach directly addresses the ethical imperative to respect individual privacy and the legal obligation to comply with data protection laws. An incorrect approach that involves collecting all available candidate information without explicit consent or a clear justification for its necessity is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This failure to obtain informed consent violates fundamental data privacy principles and likely contravenes specific articles within relevant data protection laws, which often require a lawful basis for processing personal data. Another incorrect approach, retaining candidate data indefinitely without a defined purpose or a mechanism for deletion, also presents significant regulatory risks. This practice can lead to over-retention of sensitive information, increasing the likelihood of data breaches and violating principles of data retention limitation, which stipulate that data should not be kept for longer than is necessary for the purposes for which it is processed. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the specific data protection regulations governing Baidu's operations. This involves conducting a thorough assessment of what data is truly necessary for the hiring process, designing clear and accessible consent mechanisms, establishing defined data retention policies, and implementing robust data security measures. When in doubt, seeking legal counsel or consulting with data privacy officers is crucial to ensure full compliance and ethical conduct. Question 18. The control framework reveals that Baidu is developing a new AI-powered recommendation engine, which approach best balances the imperative for rapid innovation with strict adherence to China's regulatory requirements for data privacy and cybersecurity. Option A. Conduct a thorough pre-development review of China's cybersecurity laws and data privacy regulations, integrating compliance requirements into the engine's design from inception. Option B. Implement the recommendation engine immediately and address any potential regulatory concerns that arise during its operational phase. Option C. Delay the development of the recommendation engine until all potential regulatory ambiguities in China's AI landscape are fully clarified. Option D. Focus solely on the technical performance of the recommendation engine, assuming that compliance issues will be handled by the legal department as a secondary concern. Correct answer is B. Implement the recommendation engine immediately and address any potential regulatory concerns that arise during its operational phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between fostering innovation and ensuring robust compliance within Baidu's operations. The rapid pace of technological development, particularly in AI, necessitates a flexible control framework. However, the imperative to adhere to the regulatory landscape of China, which emphasizes data security, intellectual property protection, and ethical AI deployment, demands a rigorous and proactive approach to risk management. Misjudging the balance can lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and hinder Baidu's competitive edge. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated risk assessment process that embeds compliance consideration from the initial stages of AI development. This means not merely reacting to potential issues, but anticipating them by thoroughly understanding the relevant Chinese cybersecurity laws, data privacy regulations, such as those pertaining to personal information protection, and any specific guidelines issued by Chinese regulatory bodies concerning AI. This approach ensures that Baidu's innovative projects are designed with compliance as a foundational element, minimizing the likelihood of future regulatory conflicts and fostering trust with users and authorities. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design, an approach that prioritizes speed of development over thorough regulatory review would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for China's stringent data protection laws and cybersecurity requirements, potentially leading to unauthorized data processing or breaches, which carry severe penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a wait-and-see attitude, only addressing compliance issues after they arise. This reactive stance is ethically problematic as it exposes Baidu to unnecessary risks and demonstrates a lack of due diligence, violating the expectation of responsible corporate conduct under Chinese law. Furthermore, relying solely on internal legal counsel without engaging with external experts or relevant industry bodies for interpretation of evolving AI regulations in China would be insufficient, as it might miss nuanced interpretations or emerging best practices. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory environment in China. This involves continuous monitoring of legal and policy changes. When evaluating new AI initiatives, a structured risk assessment should be conducted, identifying potential compliance gaps and developing mitigation strategies. Collaboration between R&D, legal, and compliance teams is crucial. This ensures that technical feasibility is balanced with regulatory feasibility from the outset, fostering a culture of responsible innovation. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that Baidu is considering transferring user data collected from its Chinese operations to a data center in a different country for enhanced analytics capabilities. What is the most compliant and ethically responsible approach for Baidu to undertake this data transfer, strictly adhering to China's regulatory framework for data protection and cybersecurity? Option A. Proceed with the data transfer after obtaining explicit consent from each individual user whose data will be transferred, assuming this fulfills all legal requirements. Option B. Transfer the data after anonymizing it to a degree that it cannot be linked back to any individual, believing this bypasses cross-border transfer regulations. Option C. Rely on existing international data transfer agreements that Baidu has with other entities, assuming these are universally applicable to Chinese user data. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive security assessment of the proposed data transfer. Obtain necessary government approvals or certifications as mandated by China's cybersecurity law and personal information protection law, and ensure the receiving country offers equivalent data protection standards. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the data transfer after obtaining explicit consent from each individual user whose data will be transferred, assuming this fulfills all legal requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Baidu's compliance team as they navigate the complexities of cross-border data transfer regulations, specifically concerning user data collected within China. The challenge lies in balancing the company's operational needs for data processing and analysis with the stringent legal requirements designed to protect user privacy and national security. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to these regulations can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of user trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all data handling practices are compliant and ethically sound. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of China's cybersecurity law, CSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. Specifically, it requires Baidu to conduct a security assessment and obtain necessary approvals or certifications before transferring any user data collected in China to servers located outside of China. This proactive measure ensures that data protection standards are maintained and that the transfer is legally permissible under Chinese law. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes user privacy and national data security, aligning with the spirit and letter of the relevant regulations. An incorrect approach would be to assume that standard international data transfer agreements are sufficient without considering the specific mandates of Chinese law. This fails to acknowledge the unique regulatory landscape in China, which often requires explicit government approval or specific certifications for cross-border data flows, especially for data deemed critical infrastructure or personal information. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with data transfer based on the consent of individual users alone, without fulfilling the broader legal requirements for security assessments and government authorization. While user consent is a component of data protection, it does not supersede the overarching legal obligations imposed by the CSL and PIPL regarding data localization and cross-border transfer mechanisms. Third incorrect approach would be to anonymize data to circumvent transfer restrictions. While anonymization can reduce privacy risks, it may not always be considered a sufficient safeguard under Chinese law, and the definition and effectiveness of anonymization can be subject to regulatory scrutiny. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulations for the specific jurisdiction, in this case, China. This involves consulting legal counsel specializing in Chinese data privacy law. The next step is to assess the nature of the data being transferred and its potential impact on national security and individual privacy. Based on this assessment, Baidu should then determine the appropriate legal pathway for data transfer, which may include obtaining government approval, undergoing security assessments, or implementing specific technical and organizational measures as mandated by law. Continuous monitoring and updating of compliance strategies are also crucial given the evolving nature of data protection regulations. Question 20. When evaluating a candidate for a position at Baidu and you discover that the candidate is a close personal friend, what is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action to ensure the integrity of the hiring process? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to your direct supervisor or the human resources department at Baidu and request guidance on managing the conflict of interest. Option B. Proceed with the evaluation as normal, assuming your professional judgment is objective enough to not be influenced by the personal relationship. Option C. Discreetly steer the interview questions and evaluation criteria to subtly favor the candidate, ensuring they are hired without raising suspicion. Option D. Avoid any direct involvement in the candidate's hiring process, but do not inform anyone about the personal relationship. Correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to your direct supervisor or the human resources department at Baidu and request guidance on managing the conflict of interest. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and maintain the integrity of Baidu's hiring process. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring fairness and objectivity when a personal relationship could be perceived to influence professional decisions. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance, preventing any appearance of impropriety. The correct approach involves a transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the appropriate internal authority at Baidu, such as HR or a designated ethics officer. This allows Baidu to implement a conflict of interest management plan, which might include recusal from the decision-making process or assigning the candidate to a different hiring manager. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with best practices for corporate governance and hiring integrity. It proactively addresses the potential conflict, demonstrating a commitment to fairness and preventing any undue influence on the hiring outcome. By disclosing the relationship, the individual upholds their professional responsibility and allows Baidu to manage the situation appropriately, thereby safeguarding the reputation and fairness of its recruitment procedures. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the hiring decision without disclosing the personal relationship. This failure constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violates internal Baidu policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest. Such a failure could lead to accusations of favoritism, undermining the credibility of the hiring process and potentially resulting in legal or reputational damage to Baidu. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the hiring process in favor of the personal acquaintance without explicit disclosure. This is a more insidious form of misconduct, as it involves deception and a deliberate attempt to manipulate the outcome. It directly contravenes the principles of merit-based hiring and demonstrates a severe lack of professional integrity. This action would not only be unethical, but could also lead to severe disciplinary action and legal repercussions for both the individual and Baidu. A third incorrect approach would be to avoid any involvement in the hiring process for the acquaintance, but to also fail to disclose the relationship. While seemingly neutral, this inaction can still be problematic. If the individual is in a position where their knowledge of the relationship could be beneficial in managing potential conflicts, e.g., by flagging it to a superior, their silence could be interpreted as a failure to act responsibly. Transparency is key, and simply avoiding direct involvement without proper notification can still leave Baidu vulnerable to perceptions of impropriety if the relationship later comes to light. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should always begin with identifying potential conflicts of interest. Once identified, the immediate step should be to consult relevant company policies and ethical guidelines. Transparency and open communication with the appropriate internal stakeholders are paramount. The goal is to ensure that all decisions are made impartially and in the best interest of the organization, free from personal bias or undue influence.